Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be showing you in this video how to make adorable pumpkin here, and we're going to make him step by step. I'm going to take you through real time. So before we get started, I have left the materials you will need in the description, and you will need the pattern as well, which is also linked in the description. The pattern includes 10 cats, and we are gradually working our way through making them. This is the second. I have also done a tutorial for Maurice the Munchkin cat, which I will link. If you love cats and cute animals like me, don't forget to like and subscribe, because I would love to inspire you and teach you to make your own adorable felt mini pets. So we're just going to get started now. Like I say, the materials you'll need are in the description, and you can always pause and restart the video as you go. I will briefly take you through what we're using as we do it, but it's just, if you want to make along in real time, it'd be helpful to have those materials ready. So I have printed my pattern here for a pumpkin, and I'm just going to start by getting that cut out. And I'm just using basic scissors here. You don't need anything fancy for the paper. So we have two pattern pieces for the pumpkin, and I'm just getting those cut out, and then we will cut that from the felt after that. So there's one cut out. Okay, so I'm just going to get the rubbish to one side. I have got my two pieces cut out. Each piece tells you how many pieces you will need to cut, and it is also color coded. So when you have the pattern file downloaded, you will see that you will have a materials list, and all the colors are, so this is the color felt that I'm using to cut out. And we're just going to cut that from the felt now. So I've got my felt here. I've said in the pattern you will need about half a square, and I'm basing that on 12-inch squares, which is what I usually buy. But I'm just using my offcuts here, so it's a bit creased, but it will be fine when it's finished. So this says cut two, so I'm going to cut two of this one. So I'm going to draw around it and get it cut. I'm just using a bog standard biro, and that is absolutely fine to use, because when it's sewn together, you won't see the line anyway. And this is my preference, because I just find that it's a lot less faff than if I was going to be pinning and cutting it that way. I find this a lot more precise. So this is the method that I usually recommend. You can get special embroidery pens, which I do recommend on my other video where I talk about my tools I recommend for felt sewing. You will find that on my channel, and I will pop a link if I can work it out. I'm still I'm still new to learning YouTube, but I'm really enjoying making these, so I'm glad that you're enjoying them too. So we've got two of that piece, and we're just going to do one of these. I will explain the pieces in more detail when we go to start stitching with them, because I did a mini tutorial for this on my Instagram page. If you don't follow there, you will find lots of shorter tutorials on there. And it did confuse a few people, so that was part of the reason I thought this was a really good cat to do a full-length tutorial for, because I can explain that to you. So I'm just going to roughly cut around my felt, so I've got it ready, and then I'm going to cut the cats out. So now I can put that felt to one side. Let's get our pumpkin back here. I like just looking at him because he's so cute. You have to leave a comment if you own an orange cat, because I absolutely love them. But my cat is a rescue, so it was a case of she chose us. And she's a tabby, and she's absolutely lovely. But yeah, orange cats are very cute. I love them, and I really enjoyed designing this. So I'm cutting my felt pieces out. And I'm going to try and cut slightly on the inside of the biro line, and that way it will just make sure there's no traces of pen, and it will be a nice neat finish. So I'm just going to cut round, and as you can see, I am just using basic scissors, as long as they're small enough for you to get the more fiddly bits and they're sharp to cut through the felt. That's all you need. I don't use any fancy fabric scissors. So I'm just cutting my pieces out like so. I could probably do with giving my felt a quick press actually before. So I'm using wool blend felt, which is absolutely fine to iron and press as long as you use a relatively low heat. But as it's not synthetic, it's fine to press. So I'll do that in a second, but I'll just get these pieces cut out. Like so. Okay, so there's my pieces. So we will have two of the body pieces. Yeah, this needs a bit of an iron. We have two of the body pieces, and we have a body front, which you will see it's slightly different because it is missing a leg and it is missing a bit there. And when we go to stitch that and embroider it, I will show you why I do that, and how. But it's just mainly just to add a bit of definition, because I think it, if you see here, I think it just has a nice effect and it makes it look a little bit more three-dimensional. So I'm just going to go press this and then we will go on to the next step. Okay, I have pressed my pieces. So I'm going to take you through what we will need for the next step. So I've got my two body pieces. That's a front and a back. And I also have the body front. So we need one body piece for the front and one of these, the body front piece. And then the third piece, which is the back, that's just going to one side for now. We don't need that. So I've got those pieces ready. Let me move them better into the camera. I've got those pieces ready, and I'm going to just secure them loosely with a pin. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be embroidering pumpkin. So you will need a needle. I'm just using a standard household needle. It's nothing fancy, as long as it's sharp to go through the felt. And you also need an eye big enough to fit up to 3 strands of thread, embroidery thread. And then we also have our embroidery floss. So I've got white, a pale pink, black, and brown for the stripes. And just a reminder that if you do download the pattern to do this, there is an equipment list on there which says the exact embroidery thread shades there if you wanted to go out and buy the exact ones. So we have that. And then you will also need a pen of some sort. You don't have to. I prefer to draw the face first with a pen because it allows me to get more precise, and then it will be covered with the stitching. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get started by just drawing the face. So I've got my pumpkin here that I'm using for reference, and I'm just going to make some faint lines for the face. I've got the two eyes and give it a little mouth. You might want to make him grumpy. I'm going to give it a little smile like that. So I've just drawn that really faintly with just a standard biro. And then what we need is we're going to have our black embroidery thread, and I'm going to get off about 50 centimeters. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to separate 2 strands off. So that's enough to give you a nice thick line for the face, but not so thick that it's difficult to work with. It's still nice and easy to stitch. And I'm going to tie a nice secure knot in one end, like that. And then I'm going to thread the other end with my needle. Okay, so as I explained briefly just now, we have 2 separate front pieces and they're slightly different to add a bit of layering here. But what we're going to do is we're going to embroider through both of them, which is why I've pinned them together. And then that's going to become one piece, which will be our front piece. So it's just added a nice bit of layering there, which I think adds some nice definition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started with, make sure the pieces are lined up, and I'm going to make a single stitch. So I'm going to bring my thread up and the knot will secure it. I'm going to make a single stitch the length I want the eye to be. So I'm using my pen as a guide, like that. And then I'm just going to build that up. So I'm going to make another stitch next to it. Try not to tangle it. Make another stitch next to it, the same length. And I'm just going to continue that until the eye is the size I want it. I think I'm just going to do one more and that will probably be about right. Like so. So there's one eye, and I'm just going to do the same on the other side. There's no need to restart your thread because it's only a small distance between the stitches, so it will be fine on the inside. And that will obviously be, when you stitch it together, that will be sandwiched and hidden anyway. So I'm going to do the same again. Make a stitch the length of my eye, and that's going to just cover the pen line, so that's fine. And repeat that, making the stitches close together, and then I think again I'm going to do one more. Like so. So we've got our eyes there. And then I'm going to do the nose in the same way, but it's going to be horizontal. So I've got my pen as a mark, as a guide, sorry. And I'm going to make a little stitch, the width for the nose. And repeat till I've got a little chunky nose. I think I'll just add one more. Like so. So there's my nose. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the mouth. So we're going to do a back stitch. So what you want to do is you want to make your starting stitch, which is going to be the length of the little mouth there, like so. And then I'm going to make a small stitch to start the mouth, and I'm going to take the needle into the point of the last stitch, like so. And then what that does is it makes a nice continuous line, which is what we call the back stitch. So again, I'm going to do, and the trick is to try and keep them quite small here. It's quite fiddly. It can take a little bit of practice, but I think that's what makes the cats really characterful, is that their little faces, and it makes them look nice and handmade. So again, I'm going to bring the needle into the previous point to make a stitch, and then I think I'm just going to do one more to make him smiley. And then I'm going to repeat that on the other side. So I'm going to do a stitch into the previous point of the mouth, do it again, and keep the stitch small here because it's a curve. And then one last little stitch, and you have your cute smiley pumpkin. So I'm going to just do the last bit of black detail before we restart the thread. So I'm going to do his little whisker spots here, and they're just done with single stitches. So I'm simply going to bring the needle up where I want the whisker spot to be and just make a tiny stitch like so. And I'm just going to do 3 of those. Two, and 3. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. 1, oh, 2, and 3. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to, so don't worry too much about what the underside of your felt looks like. Like I say, that will be sandwiched inside when you stitch together. I'm going to tie a knot to finish the thread now. So I'm going to try and use my finger to make the knot as close to the felt as possible. I'm going to try and do 2. And then I'm going to trim that thread. And that's the black detail on our face done. So we're going to go in then and do the little claws here. So what I've done is I've tied a knot in one end of my thread again, and I've threaded my needle, and I'm going to bring my needle up at the point I want the claw to start, and it's just a single stitch. So I'm just going to make a small stitch like that, and I'm going to do 3 of those close together. And then I'm going to repeat that for these other 2 feet, but I'm going to finish my thread in between. So again, I'm going to tie a knot on the back and trim it. Repeat it again by tying a knot in my thread. And I'm going to do that on this paw as well. These bits can be a little bit fiddly, and I think this is where my recommendation of using wool blend felt or wool felt really helps, because the felt is a lot more sturdy and it's less likely to kind of stretch, and it just keeps your finish really nice. So I've done my 3 stitches there, and again I'm going to tie the knot and trim it, and then again I'm going to tie a knot in my thread, and make the last 3 stitches. And then what I'm going to do on this one before I finish the thread, so I'll just make my last stitch. And then what I've done is I've added some small black stitches on 2 of the paws to look like, you know, when cats stand and their paw kind of gets wrinkled and they have that little crease. I just think that's so cute, so I had to add that detail. So it's just again a little single stitch like that, and then I'm going to do that on the front paw as well. So we're finishing and starting the threads the same way every time. Tie this, and I'm just going to do that little one there as well, like so. And we're going to finish that off. And that is our black detail done. So the next step is we're going to give Pumpkin his lovely little rosy cheeks here. And for that we are using the pink thread. So I'm going to pull off a little length, again about 50 centimeters, and trim that. And then again we're going to use 2 strands. So the majority of my patterns use 2 strands for the embroidered detail. So I'm going to gently pull off. There is another video on my channel on how to separate the strands if you need help with this. And I've pulled off 2 strands, and I'm just going to do the same again, tie a knot in one end and thread my needle. And we're just going to do the same as we did with the nose, which is a satin stitch. So we're just going to make, underneath the eye, we're just going to make a small stitch the width we want the cheek to be. So we want it to be quite little. It's just like a little flourish that I think just adds something sweet. And then we're going to add a second stitch close to it and just build it up. So I think I'm going to do 3 again. And then we're going to just repeat that on the other side. The good thing about my patterns is the majority of them just use a satin stitch, a backstitch, and single stitches. And then you'll need a stitch to stitch them together like a blanket stitch. But once you know those stitches, you're absolutely flying because they're all the same. And the designs just vary. And I think that's really nice to be able to just, you can just make yourself a nice collection of cats then. So that's the cheeks done. I'm just going to tie a knot in there. And then we are going to come back and do the stripes. So we're going to do the stripes now, and this is a satin stitch, so I'm going to show you how to do that as we go. And I've got my thread in the colour I want, which is a brown, and I'm going to take off 2 strands again. I think it's nice for a satin stitch to use less strands ideally, because it just gives a really nice smooth finish. So I've got about 50 centimeters of thread, and I've separated off 2 strands, and then I'm just going to tie a knot in one end, and I'm going to thread my needle like so. So we've got our pumpkin here, and we're going to do the satin stitch for his stripes. I'm just going to use a pen to mark this, so I'm just going to roughly draw where I want the stripes to be. I'm using this as a guide. So satin stitch is used to fill in an area really nicely. So these stripes are going to be filled in. So I'm just making kind of a guide to know where to do it. So there, and do one there. So I'm just roughly marking. And then we're going to have some on the face there as well. So the way that satin stitch is done is the stitches are all the same length and they're kept really close together, which just gives that lovely smooth finish. So I'm going to start with my starter stitch. So that's going to be the length that I want the stripe to be. So I'm just going to make a single stitch that length and pull it tight. And then I'm just going to build on that. So I'm going to make a stitch close next to it, again the same direction and the same length. So we're actually using a satin stitch when I do the eyes and the cheeks on most of my patterns, but it's just on a lot smaller scale. So it's the same concept, that you're just making stitches the same length and keeping them really close together and in the same direction. And then when you filled that, you will just have a really lovely smooth finish. So like this, I'm just making stitches the same length, like so. I'm just going to fill in there because there's a slight gap. So that's all we're doing, and we're just going to keep doing that until the stripe is the size we want. And as you can see, it's just got a really lovely neat finish. So I'll show you that again on this one. I can remove this pin because it's secured now with the stitching. So again, I'm just going to start by making a stitch the size of the stripe, and like so. My cat's demanding attention, if you can hear that. Just going to keep making stitches till the stripe is the desired thickness, like so. Keeping the stitches the same length and in the same direction. So I think that's enough now. And there you go, that is your satin stitch. So I'm just going to continue doing that. So I'm just going to repeat this process. So the length you want the stripe to be will determine the length of your starting stitch. So just going to keep going. Filling the stripes in and keeping the stitches close together and in the same direction, and that will just give a really nice smooth finish. And we've got some lovely distinct tabby stripes. So I'm going to do a shorter stitch here because it's on the tail. So like I say, I'm just going to do a shorter starting stitch, and that will determine the length of my stripe. And I'm just going to keep building that up. And I'm going to do the same up the tail. One there. And then I'm just going to do a chunky tip of the tail. So again, I'm just going to do that in the same way. I'm going to make a stitch the width I want it to be, and I'm just going to loosely fill that in the same way. And although we're doing a satin stitch, don't worry too much if there are gaps in your stitching or if they're slightly uneven, because I think that just adds to the character. If you think of a real orange tabby, he's not going to have even markings. And I think that's what's lovely about cats, is they're all so different. So I'm going to go to about there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish my thread and continue the rest of the body. So I'm going to, what's happened here? There we go. So I'm just going to tie a knot and trim the thread. So we're just going to continue stitching the stripes. So again, I'm taking off 2 strands and tying a knot in one end. Like that. So I'm going to start down on these feet here now. So these stripes are going to be much smaller. So I'm going to pull my thread. I'm going to make a stitch the length I want it to be. So it's going to be a much smaller. And again, I'm just going to make stitches next to each other in the same direction until they're the size I want. So I think 2 is going to be enough there because it's quite a small area. So I'm going to do that again there. And then I've also got 2 to add here. So that one's going to be about this long. using my pen as a guide here. And of course, once I've stitched over it, you wouldn't know it was there. So it's quite a good hack to get a nice neat finish, to just use a pen to draw on your design before you stitch it. And it just gives you a really nice guide and allows you a bit more precise. So that's that one. And then again, I'm going to do one here. So I'm going to do my starting stitch, and my cat's just telling me that she's brought her toy mouse in. Again, we're just keeping the stitches close together, like so. I might make that one a little bit thicker actually. So just one more to fill that in there. Okay. So I'm going to go over this side now. I'm going to tie my thread in a knot. Okay, so I'm just going to tie a knot in my thread. And I'm going to start down at the feet here and work my way up to the face. So again, this one on the foot is going to be much smaller. Okay, so then again, I'm using my pen as a guide. I'm just going to keep going along, keeping my stitches close together. One there. So I'm at the point now where I'm ready to do the stripes on the face, and obviously they're going to be much smaller. So we're going to do a much smaller starting stitch next to the eye there. And I think probably 2 is going to be enough. So I'm keeping the stitches close together again. And we're just going to do that along the top as well of the face. So I'm going to put 3 along here. So I think I'll put 3 stitches there. My cat is really wanting to be involved. This is Trixie, if you haven't seen her before. Okay, and then we're going to do one last one on the face there, and then I've run out of thread. So again, I'm probably going to do 2 on the face. Okay, so I'm ready to tie my thread now, and then I will do that last one there. Okay, so I'm just going to do my last stripe there. Going to do my starting stitch, the length I want the stripe. And again, I'm going to build that up to the thickness I want. Like so. And just fill that in. Okay, so I'm ready to do my whiskers now. Okay, so I just want a single strand of thread. I'm just going to thread my needle. And I'm just going to add my little whiskers. So I'm going to do them on the sides and on the ears there. And they are just done with single stitches. So don't worry about overlapping, because that's what whiskers do. So we're just going to make single stitches. I'm just doing this by eye. And like so. So I'm going to do 3 on that side, 3 on that side, and then some on the ears as well. I think I might just put one more there. Like so. Okay, so I've tied my knot and finished my thread, and we have our embroidered pumpkin. He is ready to sew together. So what I'm going to do is, because I obviously had 2 pieces that I stitched together, there's a little bit of overlapping. So I'm just going to trim to make sure they are all one piece. So can you just see there's some edges that are like overlapping a bit there? So I'm just going to trim those off just to make sure I get a really neat finish when I stitch it together. There's a little bit on the tail there as well. And now this is when I'm ready for my back piece and my front piece. So I'm just going to line up the edges and pin them together. And again, it's always hard to cut it completely accurate, so don't worry if they're slightly different. Again, you might just need to do a little bit of careful trimming. Obviously careful not to cut through the thread here. So I think that's okay. I think the feet are just slightly different, so I'm just going to trim that to make sure that they are the same size. Okay, so I'm ready to stitch my pumpkin together, like so. So again, I'm going to use about 50 centimeters of thread, and I'm just going to use 1 strand this time because I'm going to do my blanket stitch nice and subtle like that, so it gives a really neat finish. If you wanted to do it more of a feature, you could use more strands, but I like to just do it really subtle and discreet, so I'm just using 1 strand here. So I'm going to thread my needle up, and then you will see on your templates that it tells you where to start your blanket stitch. This isn't essential. This is just where I recommend starting it. This is just where I recommend, which will make it the least fiddly to stuff. So I'm going to start my blanket stitch by bringing my thread up from the underside of the top layer, and that knot is then going to be sandwiched on the inside, and I'm going to go over and bring the needle through, and then just before I pull it tight, I'll have a little loop here, and I'm just going to bring my thread through like that, and that's your starting stitch, and then you're going to repeat that again, and where you bring your needle up is where the length of the stitch will be. So I'm doing mine quite short, so I'm going to bring the needle up again nearly tight till there's a loop, and I'm just going to bring my needle through like that, as you can see. And there's your blanket stitch, and as you can see, it just makes a really nice edge along the edge of the felt and just gives a really nice finish. So I'm just going to continue that again, nearly tight, and pull, and I'm going to go all the way first of all I'm going to go all the way around the tail, like so. So you're just going to keep going round and making sure any loose threads are tucked in as you go. So I'm going to go to the edge of the tail and then I'm going to put some stuffing in, I think. The tail's the fiddliest bit, so I'm going to get that done first. So again, keep going round. Almost there. And I'm now going to pop a little bit of stuffing into the tail so I don't have to do it at the end. So I've got my stuffing now, and you won't need too much. I've just got like a kind of generous handful here. I find that with stuffing, the less the better, or it can go a little bit lumpy. So I'm just going to pull off really small amounts like this and pull it apart. And then I've got a pencil and I'm going to use the non-writing end. So I'm just going to remove the pin a minute. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pencil to just really gently push it in. And the tail is quite thin and fiddly, so you can kind of maneuver it to an extent, but you might not be able to get it stuffed really thickly on the tail. So I'm just going to keep using the pencil to just get that in there. So I've got some stuffing in like that. And then I'm just going to keep stitching round. Again, making sure my edges are lined up like so. And I'm just going to keep going around. I'm nearly getting to the end of my thread now, so when we get to the end of the thread I will show you how to stop and finish it and restart it with more thread. So I'm just going to go to the end of the face here. Okay, so I'll show you how I finish the thread. This is a personal preference that I find just works well for me. It's probably quite an unconventional way of doing it. But what I do is I just make a few stitches over the same one to kind of secure that. And then I take the needle through the inside. So it's not coming out the back, it's just through the inside, and I pull it out. And that just allows me to have a little tail on the inside so that now when I trim it, it's not going to unravel. So again, I'm going to get another single strand of thread and tie a knot in one end, and then I'm going to continue my stitching. So I'm threading my needle. And I'm just going to keep going round again. If you would like to do some practice blanket stitch before you stitch this together, there is also another video on my channel that shows you in a bit more simpler terms. So I'm just going to keep going round, making sure the edges are lined up as I go. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go round the leg and then I'm going to pop some more stuffing in. I find it helpful to do it as you go, because it just means that when you are almost finished, you don't then have to maneuver it through a tiny hole, and it can be a bit fiddly. I find that this is a more simple way to do it. So just keep going. Like so. I'm going to go around the leg, and then when I get to the top of the belly, I'm then going to pop some stuffing in, because the front will be all sewn together. Okay, so I've now got like a nice opening, so that's a good point to start putting the stuffing in. And again, I'm not going to use very much. I'm going to use really small bits at a time, really small here, because I'm going to start with the ears. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull it apart so it's loosened, and then I'm just going to use the pencil to gently maneuver it up into the little nooks and crannies on the cat, and that's just going to bring him to life. So I'm going to get a little bit into the feet here, like so. And you want to be felt is very forgiving, but you do want to be relatively gentle here, because you don't want to accidentally open up your stitching, which is again why I find it's easier to use less stuffing and kind of build it up. And you will find that less stuffing does go quite a long way anyway. So I'm just getting that in there, like so. So that's my front stuffed, and I'm just going to keep doing the stitching, and it's going to be a little bit of a process. So I'm going to do a little bit of stitching, add a bit of stuffing, and just kind of do it as I go. So I think I'm going to go to the edge of this foot and then put some more stuffing in. The feet are quite fiddly as well. So I'm going to pop some stuffing in now. I think my thread's probably ready to finish as well. So I'm choosing a really small amount again, and I'm going to gently push it into that foot there with my pencil. Okay, and I'm going to pop a little bit more down into the belly. And we're nearly getting to the end now, so he is really coming to life and looking very cute and chonky. A little bit more, I think. So, and I think I'm going to just have one last fresh length of thread so it's not too fiddly around the feet. So I'm just going to do the same as I showed you how I finished my thread. So I'm going to do a few stitches over, and then I'm going to bring the thread through with a tail and trim it. And we're on to the last bit now. So Okay, so I'm just doing my last bit. So again, I'm going to start my thread by bringing it through from the underside of the top, going over, and just before it's tight, I'm just going to bring my thread through like that. So just going to keep going. And then just before we finish the stitching, just going to pop a little bit of stuffing into that last foot. Okay, a little bit more. Tuck any loose threads in as you go. I'm just going to get a tiny bit more stuffing and pop that in. It gets a little bit more fiddly at this point, which is again why I recommend stuffing as you go. I'm going to just use the writing end because it's a little bit thinner and I can't quite get it in. There we go. And I'm going to use a pencil to just kind of stuff in the loose fibres so that they don't get caught in my stitching. And then I'm just going to keep going. And I'm just going to bring that thread through, trim it. And our pumpkin is done. He's so cute. This is one of my favourites. I really hope this was helpful. And please remember, if you love cats like me and want to learn more, then please subscribe along. Let me know how you get in the comments. And I hope this was helpful. See you next time.